How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Vav, Daf 56 of Masechta Zevachim. Friends, the first section of Daf 56, we kind of continue in the middle of a discussion from yesterday about the qedusha of the azarah. We discussed yesterday in terms of kachim kalim, where in the azarah can kachim kalim be slaughtered, essentially anywhere in the azarah. We are then going to kind of push that topic a little bit further and discuss things like tumah. It's going to come into it in terms of the azarah and where you can and can't go as a tamei individual. That's the first section of today's daf. That's really kind of the more, I don't know if the word is difficult, but the more complex part of today's daf, right? Also, the end of yesterday was a little bit complex. So that's kind of the complex part. And then at the bottom of Nun Vav Amid Aleph, we get to a new topic of the expiration of blood at sundown. We've already known about this for quite some time, that Zrikas Adam must be done before sundown. We are going to learn the source for that. And finally, when a shelamim becomes pigul, and no, sir, it sounds tricky, but it isn't. Yeah. Because the shelamim, of course, it can be eaten for 2 days and the night in between. What about the following night is really the question. We're going to see a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Chizkiah. Let's kind of leave it at that and let us simply jump in. Friends, we are going to begin on Daf Nun Hey Amid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Ein chayav mishum tuma ela al orich 187 al rochav 135. Okay, Chaver, if you remember from the first parak of Masechta Shavuos, Tumas Mikdash v'Kodoshav, if a tamei person is not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash, which part specifically of the Beis HaMikdash is he unable to go into? The azarah. The azarah. The Gemara gets fancy with 187 long, 135 wide, but that's the azarah. We could pull up just this classic diagram that we had from yesterday. You see the Beis HaMikdash, of course, the square side on the right with the 4 squares in the corners. That's the Ezras Nashim. We're not talking about that. But once you enter through Shar Nikanor into the azarah, which is the area where the Mizbeach is, etc., from that point on, that is where you may, that's what we're talking about. From that point, from Shar Nikanor until the wall behind the Kodesh HaKodashim is 187 amis, and the width of that space is 135 amis. Anywhere in that zone, tamei people can't go in. Of course, we learned about the Mitzorah. As an aside, we learned about the Mitzorah. Recently, it was a whole question of how he has to stand like by the Shar Nikanor and kind of stick in his behonis. Anyways, because that was the whole question, because a tamei person isn't allowed past Shar Nikanor. Okay, you can drink a little water over here. Now, so let's start again. So Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ein chayav mishum tuma ela al orich 187 al rochav 135. So in terms of a tamei person going into the Beis HaMikdash, Tumas Mikdash v'Kodoshav, we're talking about a tamei person who goes into, right, through Shar Nikanor into the azarah, which is 187 amis long and 135 amis wide. Tanitana Kamadir of Nachman, a teacher of Tanis, of Brises, taught before Rav Nachman, Kol azarah, Kuf Pezayin al Rochav Kuf Lamed Hey, that the azarah was 187 amis long and 135 amis wide. Amalei, and says Rav Nachman to this Tana, Hochi Amali Abba, this is what my father told me, Kigon Zeh, that in this area, in the azarah, Kigon Zeh, in this space, 187 long, 135 wide, Kohanim nichnasin l'sham, ve'ochlin sham kachei kachim. Kohanim can eat kachei kachim in this area, ve'shochlin sham kachim kalim, and anywhere in this area, kachim kalim can be slaughtered. V'chav mishum tuma, and somebody who's tamei that goes into this area will be chayiv, whether on purpose chayiv karis, whether by accident chayiv a korban olav yored. Lemute mai. So when we're saying this space to the exclusion of which space? Ilem lemute chlonis dlasis v'oviachoma. If we're saying that it's to exclude any windows in the surrounding walls, or doors in the surrounding walls, or the thickness of the surrounding walls, tanina. But we have a Mishnah to the opposite effect. Achlonis v'oviachoma kilifnim, that we treat the windows and winders. What's like the old school way to say window? Winder? Winder? Like winder. The winders and the thickness of the wall, kilifnim, they're like the inside of the azarah. So again, what's being excluded? Rather, it's coming to exclude the chambers that surround the azarah, right? Like we have this diagram that we had yesterday with the circles around those chambers in the walls of the azarah. Those are being excluded. But now, one second. But one second. If they open up into the azarah, we learn in the Mishnah, Tochan Kodesh, that these chambers that open up into the azarah are Kodesh. So sounds like they're not being excluded. Midrabanan. They're only Kodesh Midrabanan. Midoraisa lo, one second. So we're saying Midoraisa, these chambers are excluded from the azarah. We learn that when you have these chambers that open up into the azarah, Kohanim are allowed to go into those chambers and eat and eat the shiari mincha. They're at the flower offerings. In order for them to be able to eat kodshei in the chambers, they must be considered part of the azarah midoraisa. So Talmud lomer b'chatzer oil moed yochlu hatorah b'ser chatzeres arbe eitzel achila. That the pasuk says, if you look at the pasuk, it says b'makom kadosh b'chatzer oil moed. Right, it's talking about that. Yeah, there are. Right, it says hatorah ribsa chatzeres arbe eitzel achila. That the Torah had lots of different places and chatzers and chambers that you can eat these kodshei kodshim in new. So we see that these chambers, so long as they open up into the azarah, kohanim mamish eat kodshei kodshim. So that it must be that they're not excluded, that they're actually included, even midoraisa. So you can eat kodshei kodshim there. So Merava says la'achila shiny. Okay, for look, the Torah says, right, specifically includes achila. What does the pasuk say? I'm going to read that pasuk. Matzos te'ochel b'makom kadosh b'chatzer el moed yochlua. Right, that pasuk is talking about all about eating. Okay, so you can eat kodshei kodshim in those chambers. Aval inyan tumalo. Okay, so we're saying fine. So we're saying that those chambers are considered part of the azarah for being able to eat kodshei kodshim and shari mincha. But it sounds like they would not be considered part of the azarah in terms of tumah. But we learn the Brisa, these chambers that open up into the azarah. Okay, the Kohanim can eat kodshei kodshim there. But they don't slaughter kodshim kalim in these chambers. B'chayovin mishum tumah. And you're chayav in them for tumah. So it sounds like these chambers, you would be chayav in terms of tumah. So lav amrit ein shochten. But one second. There's some inconsistency in that brisa, because while it says that the Kohanim can eat kodshei kodshim there, it also says that they can't slaughter kodshim kalim in there. So are they considered part of the azarah? Are they not considered part of the azarah? So just like we're saying that they are not considered part of the azarah vis-a-vis slaughtering kodshim kalim, so tninami ein chayavin. So also say you're not chayav in terms of tumah. So meaning Kohanim can eat kodshei kodshim in there because the Torah specifically said that you can eat kodshei kodshim there, right? We talked about eating. B'makom kadosh b'chatzer oil moed. We said that Torah ribsa chatzeros harbe when it comes to eating, but in terms of slaughtering kodshei kalim, no, excluded. In terms of going in and being chayav for being tummy in there, excluded. So bishlama ain't shochtin, ba'ina kneged pesach v'lecha. Tushigomai says, one second. I understand why you would not slaughter kachim kalim in these chambers, because they are not, right? The pasuk had said Pesach oil moed, and in these chambers there's no Pesach oil moed. Ella in chayovin, but we're saying that you would not be chayiv for going in a state of tumah. Why not? Amai? Why should you should be chayiv for going in there in a state of tumah? There's not like we need any Pesach oil moed when it comes to tumah. But according to you, that you're saying that you should be chayiv for going in a state of tumah, ein shochtin, when we say that you don't slaughter in these chambers, well, can't we say that it's talking about even in a scenario where it's opposite the Pesach Ol Moed? Meaning, if you have a chamber that's opposite the ulam, we had talked about yesterday how in the Beis HaChalifin, in the Beis HaChalifos, that where they had the knives, and there was that pishpish, there was that opening that was opposite the sides of the ulam where there were chambers. So we could say it's talking about where you'd be slaughtering in one of those chambers opposite the pishpish of the Beis HaChalifos, and still we're saying it's not part of the azarah. Because after all, if we're just talking about like a chamber that was not Pesach Ol Moed, then obviously you can't slaughter there. Elamai, we're talking about even when it is opposite Pesach Ol Moed, you still can't slaughter there because it's excluded from the azarah. So rather, even though you're slaughtering kachim kalim opposite Pesach Ol Moed, still Tani ain't shochetin mishum de lo kadosh. You can't slaughter kachim kalim there because it is not holy. Tninami ein chayavin, and therefore teach also you would not be chayav for going in there in a state of tumah because it is not holy. Now, one second, we're saying that Kohanim can eat kachim in any of these chambers, no problem. There's no concern about Pesach or Moed. But V'atani, we learned the brayso yesterday, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda Omer, Shnei pishpish shenayu bebeis HaChalifis, that there were these two openings in the Beis HaChalifis. Govan Shmona, there were 8 amas tall, Kedei, Lahachsher Esa Azarah, Lachilas Kachim, L'Shchilas Kachim Kalim. In order, you needed these openings in the Beis HaChalifos in order to allow eating kachim in the azarah. So we see that you need Pesach Ol Moed to eat kachim. Ravina Sami Mikan Achila. Ravina says, no, drop from that brisa by the pishpishin, the eating of the kachim. No, the point of opening up entrances in the Beis HaChalifos was not to allow eating kachim in the, behind, opposite the Beis HaChalifos. No, that you don't need the Pesach Ol Moed for that. You just need it for the slaughtering of the kachim kalim. V'aksiv bashlu esabos or Pesach Ol Moed v'shem tochlu also. But it says by the miluin, when they were inaugurating the Mishkan, and it says cook the meat Pesach Ol Moed, and that's where you'll eat it. So it sounds like by eating, you do have to have Pesach Ol Moed. Kachei Shah Shiny. Yeah, but that was the Miluim. The Miluim were a one-time event as part of the inauguration of the Mishkan. That doesn't apply to future generations. And while, sure, by the Miluim, they wanted to be Pesach Moed, right? There was an obligation for Pesach Ol Moed that wouldn't apply in the Beis HaMikdash, for example, for future generations. So what is the takeaway from this discussion on Daf Vav Amud Aleph? The takeaway is that the azarah itself, to the exclusion of the chambers around it, the azarah itself is holy in terms of Tamid people can't go into the azarah, but would not be chayav for going into the chambers. In terms of slaughtering kachim kalim, again, the azarah itself, but not the chambers. We did have a special limud from a pasuk to say that Kohanim can eat kachim in these chambers that open up into the azarah. Now we move on to the next section of today's daf that discusses the expiration of blood at sundown. We've already known this for quite a while, that, even from the introduction, I think, to Masechtas Zevachim almost 2 months ago, right? When we were talking about pigul and chutz lizmano, we said that blood, you have until sundown to do zrikas adam. In terms of aktaras emurin, you have until the morning. And in terms of eating the korban, that of course will depend on the korban, how much time you have to eat it. So, says the Gemara, how do we know that you only have until sundown for zrikas adam? Shneimar, the pasuk says, biyom, during the day, hakrivo es zivcho, that the offering is slaughtered, ye'achel can be eaten. So biyom hakrivo, that akrivo is a reference to the zrikas adam, and it has to be bayom. Biyom she'ata zoveach, on the day that you slaughter the korban, ata makriv, you do zrikas adam. Biyom she'ata zoveach, but if we're talking about a day that is not the day that the korban was slaughtered, ata makriv, you can no longer do zrikas adam. But 1 second, this pasuk is needed legufe to teach. Right? What does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, wait, where is? This isn't the. Oh, is this the pasuk? Okay, what's this? V'im. Yeah, of course. V'im nedo nedava zevach korbano biyom akrivo as zivcho yachol umi machras v'anosim menu ye'achel. Wait, what? V'im nedo nedava zevach korbano biyom akrivo as zivcho yachol umi machras v'anosim menu ye'achel. I don't know, I'd have to look up what that means. That sounds a little bit funny. But anyways, this is talking about a korban shelamim, and it's saying that for a korban shelamim, you have 2 days to eat it. So it's not teaching about anything about zrikas adam. It's saying that you have 2 days to eat a korban shelamim. So if it was just teaching 2 days for a korban shelamim, let the pasuk say, Nemakra biyom zivcho, that on the day that it is slaughtered, ye'achel, it can be eaten, and also the next day. Hakrivo, akrivo lomali. Why do I need to say anything about hakrivo, about the zrikas adam? Shmamina biyom she'ata zovech ata makriv. What it's coming to say is that on the day of the slaughtering, you do the zrikas adam biyom she'ata zovech iata makriv. But on a day that you didn't slaughter the korban, there's no doing zrikas adam. You slaughter the korban that day, you do zrikas adam. By sundown already, it's too late. Maybe this is what the pasuk is saying. I kariv dama idna. Look, if today you did the zrikas adam, nisachil basar idno l'machar, so then the 2 days that you have to eat it are today and tomorrow. Ikar if dam l'machar, if you do zrikas adam tomorrow, and that's completely fine, but if you do zrikas adam tomorrow, so then the 2 days you have is nisachil basar l'machar liyom al-chara. Then you have 2 days starting tomorrow. That the 2-day window begins on the day of the zrikas adam. But the zrikas adam doesn't have to be done today. Maybe it could be done tomorrow. Imkein nemakra biyom akrivo ye'achel. Well, then you could just say on the day of the zrikas adam, it's eaten. But there's an important word there, which is biyom akriva zivcho. We're talking about zevach, which is slaughtering. Lamali, why is the slaughter important? So shmamina biyom shata zoveach ata makrivo. Rather, what it's saying that on the day of the shchita is when you also do zrikas adam. Biyom shata zoveach ata makrivo. But on the day that you didn't do the zvicha, the shchita, you don't do zrikas adam. It's on the day that the animal is slaughtered. That is when there's the zrikas adam. You have until sundown. Once you have sundown, it is too late. And now we arrive at the final section of the daf, when a shelamim becomes pigul and noser. Again, as I said in the introduction, it sounds a little bit more tricky than it is. It's actually not particularly difficult. Says the Gemara, Idmar was said, or shlishi. So we're talking about a korban shelamim, okay? Now, a korban shelamim, of course, you have 2 days to eat it. The day that it's slaughtered, the next day, and the night in between. So the question is, at what point do you get into trouble? Right? We're going to discuss pigul and noser. So, for example, if you slaughter a korban shelamim with the intention to eat it not tonight, but the following night. Now, it's past the time that you can eat it, right? You have today, tonight, and tomorrow, not tomorrow night. So if you slaughter a korban shelamim with the intention of eating it tomorrow night, is it pigul? What if tomorrow night, forget about pigul, but you offer a korban shlamim, you can eat it today, tomorrow night you make a mistake and by accident you eat it tomorrow night. Do you have to bring a korban chatas for having eaten noser? So that's the question. How do we relate to the night following the expiration of a korban shlamim? So itmar machashiv leor shlishi. So if somebody, let's say, slaughters a korban shlamim with the intention of eating it the second night, that's what we'll refer to it as the second night, the night following the second day, which is already too late. Chizkiya Amar Kosher. Chizkiya says it's not pigul. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Pasul. Rabbi Yochanan says it's pasul. It is pigul. Chizkiya Amar Kosher. Chizkiya says the korban is kosher. De'alo intik l'sreifa, because it's not yet the time to burn it. You only right. It's only the following day that you would actually now burn the leftover, the noser shelamim. So since it's not yet, so sure, you shouldn't be eating it at this point, but it's not yet, so it's past the time to eat it, but it's pre the time to burn it, so therefore says Chizkiya, it will not be pigul. Rabbi Yochanan says it is pasul, it is pigul, because it's past the time that you're allowed to eat it, it's too late. Ha'ochla shlishi. Now what if somebody eats by accident the meat on the second night? Chizkiya Amar Pater. Again, Chizkiya says you won't have to bring a korban chatas. Do I intik l'sreifa, because the low intik l'sreifa, because it's not yet in sreifa mode, in sreifa zone. That's only the next day. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chaya. Rabbi Yochanan says you have to bring a korban chatas. Do I eat chilei me'achila, because it's already, you ate it at a time when you were no longer allowed to eat it. It was too late. Tani kavasa Rabbi Yochanan, we have a brisa supporting Rabbi Yochanan. Kachim and echalim liyom echad. Then when it comes to korbanos that can be eaten for only one day, unlike a shlam which can be eaten for 2 days. So mechashvin b'dama mishatishka achama. So a korban that can be eaten for 1 day. So in terms of when's too late for zrikas adam, shkia. Uvivsarin uve'emurein, in terms of if you have in mind to eat the korban past its proper time, or to burn the emurin past their proper time, Mishal Amud HaShachar, that is the next morning at Amud HaShachar, right? Because we're talking about a korban that can be eaten for 1 day. So you have that day and the following night, by Amud HaShachar, you can no longer eat it. You can no longer burn its emurim. Now, what if we're talking about korbanos that could be eaten like a shlamim for 2 days and the night between? So in terms of when would it be too late for zrikas adam? Sundown. And in terms of burning the emurim, of course you have until the morning, Mishal Amud HaShachar, at that point it's too late. And what about in terms of eating its meat? Skip the next word, yamim, you don't need it. That if you have in mind to eat the korban on the second night, that's already too late and you're in trouble, like Rabbi Yochanan says. Is it possible that you can eat a korban shlamim on the second night? Because after all, I'll make the following argument. V'dinu. Look, some korbanos can be eaten for 1 day. Other korbanos can be eaten for 2 days. So just like when it comes to korbanos that can be eaten for 1 day, you can also eat it the following night. So I'll say maybe also korban shlamim that you can eat for 2 days. You can also eat it the following night. Tamalomer vanosar ad yom. Right, it says right b'yom. It says b'yom zivchachem ye'ochel umimachos vanosar ad yom. V'od yom unechel v'nechel leor shlishi. That you can only eat it so long as it is still day. Right, so long as it's still the second day. Comes the second night, it's too late. Yochel yisarif miyad. Okay, so now maybe you should burn any noser of shlamim immediately on the second night. Because v'dinu, I'll make the argument, some korbanos are eaten for 1 day, some korbanos are eaten for 2 days. Just like a korban that's eaten for 1 day and the following night, immediately following the night, right? Meaning immediately the next morning, you would burn any leftovers. So I'll say also a korban that can be eaten for 2 days. Immediately once it expires, i.e. the second night, burn it immediately the second night. Don't wait till the next day. It says no. That on the next day is when you burn it. You burn it the next morning. You don't burn it the second night. Friends, that was Daf Nun Vav of Masechta Zevachim. On Daf Nun Vav of Masechta Zevachim, we learned about the qedusha of the azarah. We said that qedusha of the azarah includes the chambers to eat kodshe kodshim. It excludes the chambers to shecht kodshim kalim, and it excludes the chambers for tumah. We then discussed the expiration of blood at sundown, which is halacha that we already knew, but we learned the source for that. And finally, when a shelamim becomes pigul and noser, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it immediately becomes pigul and noser the second night, whereas Chizkiah says only on the third day, because until then it is not yet, wouldn't yet burn it, so therefore since you wouldn't yet burn it until the third day, you also wouldn't be chayiv for machsheves chutz lezmano or for having eaten noser by accident. Friends, that was Daf Nun Vav of Masechta Zevachim. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Cheers!